Bing bong. I am live with another edition of the State of Bitcoin podcast where I have a very special guest. I have Jesse Berger here waiting in the waiting room right now. He's the author of The Magic Internet Money, a book about Bitcoin. It's a phenomenal book. So if you haven't gotten it yet, the link is in the description or show notes. So be sure to get that. But first, big shout out to my sponsor. I got the Pleb Lab shirt on. So shout out to Pleb Lab, the #1 hacker space in the game. They got outstanding courses. They just launched a Nostr Devs course, so be sure to check that out on their website, pleblab.com. You can become a Nostr developer in just a simple 8-hour course. It's designed for everybody. So, if you're a beginner, you're not really, sure how to quite get into it. They break it down very simply and give you all the steps and tools you need to be a successful Nostr dev. So it's awesome stuff. And then they also got a ton of events going around BitBlock Boom. So if you're going to be in Austin for BitBlock Boom, they have Startup Day, August 21st and 22nd. I will be there. I'll be moderating some great panels as well. So be sure to get some tickets to come check out some great people. Odell speaking, Muzz from Lightning Ventures, and much, much more. So be sure to come into Austin and be there for BitBlock Boom. And if you're going to BitBlock Boom and you haven't bought your ticket yet, use promo code Green Candle. You can get 10% off your entire ticket and use that 10% to stack more sats. What could get better? I mean, just come down to Pleb Lab, join me in Austin for that week in late August, and it'll be a lot of fun. All right, enough from me. Let's get Jesse up here. Jesse, man, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Brandon. Good to be here, man.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming in. So, it was great to meet you at the Canadian Bitcoin Conference, but it's been, I don't know, like a month or so. So, how have things been since then? And doing anything exciting?
Well, it's been a month or so. And also, do you remember when we were talking Saturday night? We were at sort of the social event Saturday night at the bar with everybody. And we were having this great conversation. And then someone just grabbed my shoulder and was pulling me away. And I know who he is. I'm not going to name him. Little gremlin was tugging at me you got to come over here. You got to come over here. And I was dude, I'm having a conversation here. You and I were talking. He's like, no, you got to come. You got to come. You got to come. And so, do you know what it was? Because I don't think I saw you again after the end of the night.
No, we lost it after that. We were talking a little bit, and then you got pulled away, and I didn't see where you went the rest of the night.
I got pulled away, and what he wanted me to do. We're at a Bitcoin conference, right? Everyone knows about Bitcoin. Everyone doles out orange pills. He was drag me over to the bar, and he was tell the bartender, orange pill the bartender. I'm not a magician. I wrote a book about Bitcoin. It's called Magic Internet Money, but it's not I just bump into people and boom, magically they get Bitcoin because they're around me. And it was just so crazy.
Yeah,
but he's you got an orange pill a bartender. It's you can do it. Why do you need me?
Yeah, why you at all? It was funny because it was we were upstairs. We had the full upstairs. It was all Bitcoiners. I think they were even taking tips and Lightning. I don't even know if they knew really what was going on, but they were we'll take tips and Lightning. So I don't know. It was a cool spot, but yeah, I don't know why you of all people. We're in the middle of the conversation. That's hilarious. But yeah, I gave you a brief intro at the beginning, but for those who don't know you listening, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us the orange pill story. Let's hear it, man. Let's go into it.
Sure thing. So I started my career in retail banking in 2006. I eventually went on to work in wealth management, doing full service brokerage, so managing investment accounts for high net worth individuals and their corporations. That was in 2011. I did that until 2013. And basically at the end of my time in retail banking and the beginning of my time in investing was when I got red pilled on Austrian economics, effectively in sound money, because the financial crisis had just happened. And I remember, they come out with this, we have a $600 billion bailout for banks. And I'm sitting there going wait, I don't remember learning how, they just have a giant pile of money sitting around that they're just going to hand out to select corporations. Another industry or business fails, they don't get bailed out, but this industry does. I don't understand. This doesn't make sense to me. So I started questioning things around 2008, 2009. I had heard about Bitcoin, call it 2010. And I remember when I first started working in wealth management, me and a couple buddies, I was talking to a couple buddies. They were getting, we were watching Max Kaiser. So we were kind of hearing him talk about it. I was like, what, it would probably be a good idea. Maybe we should get a little bit in case it catches on. Let's put $1,000 into Bitcoin. It was at $1 at the time. And, we were just idiot bankers. We didn't actually know how to do it. And we basically all chickened out because we're like, oh, like, how are we going to store it? We're probably going to lose it. And in fairness, we probably would have lost it because there was no infrastructure or very minimal infrastructure for Bitcoin at the time. Not the same way we have, you have a cold card or you have different devices and apps on your phone for wallets. Like none of that was available then. So we didn't buy. Obviously, it goes from $1 to like $50. And I just remember thinking, oh, I missed the boat. And so it was in the back of my mind, the whole time, but I was just like, I missed it. I went on to do my MBA and work in management consulting, both in the financial sector. And then I ended up managing the customer experience market research program for one of Canada's biggest insurance companies for a couple of years. And it was around that time that I rediscovered Bitcoin, started actually buying some, had a friend who was really into it, who's like, hey, this is how you buy it. This is how you store it. He got me set up with a device early on. And so he helped me feel comfortable using it. And then, things just took off from there. 2017 was a crazy year. And, I just went down all the rabbit holes after that, and it consumed me.
Yeah, that's great stuff. But, you seem like you kind of, you followed it, you have the banking background and everything like that. But, why the book? Why did you decide to kind of write it out that way? And, I guess, show your proof of work, so to speak, in the Bitcoin space through that.
Yeah. So when I left my job, I was, I started off buying a bunch of other crypto. I have obviously, it took me about a year to realize, oh no, Bitcoin is the thing, because I was combining my old knowledge of, Austrian economics, sound money, like the principles of that, with technology as I was coming to understand it, blockchain, proof of work, whatever, all the different elements that go into it. So all the puzzle pieces started to fit together for me and make sense in my head. And so I was like, wow, this is, I see now the roadmap. I sort of see where Bitcoin is going and how it's going to get there. To some degree, I'm not a visionary or whatever, but like I had the image that that the Bitcoiners all share. And so I thought, wow, like I want to help people understand this. And I never set out to write a book. I have no training as an author or writer or anything. I always thought I was okay with words, but basically, I decided, you know what? I have this background in wealth management. Why don't I try to put together like a presentation? I'll go around, I'll find some high net worth investors, and I'll try to show them, guys, like, you should have Bitcoin. Everyone should have Bitcoin. You guys should have Bitcoin. And I would treat it sort of like like I was in wealth management, right? I would not necessarily manage a portfolio for them, but just if I can get them in, run a fund. I don't know what I was thinking, really. I just wanted to show people, hey, there's something here and you shouldn't ignore this. And it started off as a slideshow. It was within a few weeks. It was like 80 slides. It was huge. It was like 85 slides or something. I show it to a friend of mine and he just looks at me and he goes, Jesse, like, you're an idiot. You can't, like, you're going to spend 5 hours showing someone this. No one's going to sit through that. This is terrible, but it's a great skeleton for a book. Maybe you should turn it into a book. And so went to sleep that night, woke up the next morning. I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. And I just went to work turning it into a book.
Yeah, and it's a great book. I mean, I was telling you a little bit pre-show, like I've read, like, I would say probably 70-80% of it at this point, but then I got the Chat GPT little summary at the end too. But I mean, overall, I think it's like extremely well written and really gets the point across. So, but it's interesting though. You start off like at the very beginning as, what is money? So when you were going through that aspect of things, like, hey, what is money? Like the media of exchange, that kind of stuff, how did that change? Or, I guess, how did you view that? Or initially when you like pre-Bitcoin, you're obviously kind of in the banking industry and kind of like that world of things. And then it seems like, Bitcoin almost flips that world upside down. So did you kind of have like that understanding of what is money prior to going through this rabbit hole? And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
I had this understanding in my head that if you have, what you could call bad money or unsound money, for, money that has poor characteristics and qualities, right? If it can be easily printed, if it's value, if it doesn't stand the test of time, if it's not durable, portable, divisible, all the qualities that you would associate with sound money. If it's not those things, or in the case of fiat, it's just you have a central entity, prints it at a whim, all the other market participants don't have that same access, right? The central banks have this, they're in this privileged position where only they can print money on behalf of the government. It costs them nothing when they spend it, but it has real value in the marketplace. I understood that leads to poor socioeconomic outcomes because it has this unfair advantage. You have the Cantillon effect of, whoever has quicker access to the money or is in proximity to the money printer is going to benefit more than the people who receive it once it trickles through down the rest of the line to the economy. So I understood that sort of socioeconomic connection. I understood, again, pre-Bitcoin, how gold leveled the playing field to some degree in the sense that anyone can go mine gold and they put in the work. So it's costly. You're not just creating it for free. You can't, or it's much more difficult to forge. And it creates a more level playing field for value. And as a result of money that has these better qualities, that's scarce and sound, or that's scarce and difficult to produce, you're more discerning with how you spend it, because it's not, oh, well, I can just print more. So if I spend and I make a mistake, well, I'll just print more and spend again. And I'll just, if I make another, I never learned my lesson because there's no consequence to spending. And so a harder, sounder money adds in those consequences and that responsibility of being more judicious and more careful with your money. And then Bitcoin just builds on the characteristics of gold and makes them even better. And I eventually put that part of the puzzle together, several years later.
Yeah, for sure. And I told you this at the beginning of the show, but this is probably like my favorite excerpt that I got from the entire book. And it's just right at the beginning, at third paragraph. Nice. So I'm going to read it here for those who haven't read the book yet. If not, you should definitely check it out. It's available wherever you get books. And what you get, it's like magicinternetmoney.com or something like that.
So magicbitcoinbook.com. And yeah, obviously links to the paperback, ebook, audiobook. And also you can buy individual pages of my book for sats on Lightning on my website.
There we go. That's awesome stuff. So yeah, I mean, you should definitely check it out if you haven't already. There's it's everywhere. But here's my favorite excerpt. So today, money is controlled by masters who, obscured behind a veil of prestige, pull its strings like a puppeteer, leading us astray like a Pied Piper. Operating under the guise of promoting prosperity, they deceive us into discounting their dismal track record, which perpetuates economic inequality by continuously diluting the value of our money, affecting how we use our time and efforts. I mean, that just like nails it on the head, dude. So, I mean, you like cut yourself short because you said you were, you're not a writer, right? You were putting through like all of this, slides initially, but it seems like, you really were very thoughtful with almost every single word, like especially that paragraph alone, right? So, I mean, like, as you were going through this, like, what was your, I guess, overall goal to accomplish with this book? And like, who was your kind of target audience? Because it seems like, at first you were kind of maybe going towards like high net worth of individuals, but, and in a sense, like it's very digestible, and it seems like it can be read by, seemingly anybody at this point, who, I guess, has like a high school, maybe even middle school level education.
Yeah, when I put this when it was a presentation initially, that's when I was thinking, oh, I'll pitch it to high net worth investors. But when I made it a book, yeah, the audience changed completely because, the format now. You have the book in front of you. Every page is its own individually titled little mini essay that comprises, one idea, one subject, one argument. And basically I took the format that I had on the slideshow and converted it into a book. So, when you have a slideshow, you have you're presenting on one idea or one set of data or whatever, and you're explaining it. And so I did sort of the same thing with the book. But then what I wanted to do, I was sort of telling myself as I was writing it, that I was going to do this like impossible book where I'm going to take ideas from all kinds of disciplines, right? Politics, game theory, economics, technology, whatever. And I'm going to try to put it into as simple and relatable terms as possible while like going as deep as I can for an introductory page, right? For one, argument on one idea. I want to go as deep as possible on one page while still being in simple, relatable, easy to understand terms. So you mentioned that, you didn't see any words wasted. you have no idea how much I slaved over making sure that there's no waste in this book. It's every word is very, very intentional. I went over it with a fine tooth comb many times over. I rewrote entire chapters, some of them several times, trying to get it right. And yeah, no, I'm obviously very proud of it. And the target audience is literally anyone. I've had beginners who benefit from it. I've had, novices and experts tell me they think it's an amazing resource, because if you're trying to remember, oh yeah, what's the argument for why money with a fixed supply would be the best, generate the best possible economic outcomes? Well, like I explained that in like 3 pages. And you can just get that, like you said, you have that one paragraph. It's like, okay, give me the elevator pitch on why fix the money? Like what is money? Why fix the money? Boom, one paragraph. You just like, it's there, it's right there. So yeah, thank you for recognizing that. Cause I killed myself to get that right and to make sure every word was in place and that anyone could just pick it up and understand it. But yeah, the target market's everyone. The book's meant to be very friendly. It's not intimidating, right? Like I have the copy too. You got the cover with, there's a wizard on it. It's got sort of full page images. I'll find you one here. Just literally, right? I got my evil banker man. I got full page images and graphs and charts to just keep it very inviting for the reader, so you don't have to feel too intimidated, because Bitcoin is a difficult topic if you don't have a background in either the money or the tech or your game theory or whatever it may be.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And, I really liked how you laid it out as well, right? I mean, you kind of give like an introduction to money, then you kind of go into Bitcoin, blockchain, mining, advantages, some criticisms too, kind of like debunking those and going through, just the whole thing, right? I mean, it's a very well thought out and, kind of the overall process. But, when you, I guess talk to readers of the book, or like when you were kind of going through it even yourself, what was something, I guess, the topic that you thought was maybe like the hardest to grasp when it came to Bitcoin? Like, was it maybe the mining, maybe was the nodes, maybe it was blockchain? Like, what was like kind of like the most difficult thing that you seem like, it was hard to kind of make simplistic in a sense?
There's a lot of elements of it that were tricky to make simplistic. Actually, you know what? The craziest thing is, I thought because I had this background in banking and economics, and I thought I understood money, that, oh, you know what? Doing chapter 3 is called money. Chapter 4 is called growth, which is basically meant to be a synonym for economics. I remember thinking, oh, those ones are going to be easy because I have those like in my head. I know exactly what they're going to be. Those ones turned out to be really hard for me to get it and explain it the way I wanted it, that I thought that it would be very relatable, very easy, and just, convey a clear, concise message. So those ones were a lot trickier than I thought, believe it or not. The drawbacks one is probably the one I get the most feedback on, where people are like, I really appreciate that you tried to criticize Bitcoin. And if you read every word of that chapter, it's like the first 80% of any page is, okay, I'm trying to explain what the potential drawback is, but I kind of end every page with, but there's kind of a solution either that exists or that's waiting to be implemented. People criticize Bitcoin can't scale. Well, at the time, Lightning was like just on the cusp. Now it's here, it's maturing. We're also seeing, I believe his name is Burak, came out with Arc as another potential sort of layer 2. And these things are, it's not proven. We're not 100% certain that these are going to work for everybody throughout the world forever, but solutions are there. People are working on them. We're trying to bring them to the fore. We're trying to make them usable. And that was sort of the undertone I wanted to have for most of the drawback section is, yeah, like you can criticize Bitcoin, but just be aware that for basically every criticism that exists, there's a solution either that's currently being worked on or waiting in the wings, or you just don't even know about it.
Yeah, and I like that. You stole my thunder, dude. I was going to go to the drawback section right after. So, I mean, you kind of set me up there nicely. But, I mean, you talked about like the scalability aspect of things too, right? But, I mean, I think it doesn't seem like it's as big of a topic as it was maybe last year or the year before. But there was like the big ESG movement with mining, right? I mean, and you're Canadian, right? I mean, and it seems like every other now it was, or at first it was the COVID crisis, and now it's seemingly moving towards the climate change crisis, right? So, how do you, I guess, I'll leave it fairly broad. How do you see that playing out when it comes to Bitcoin, because it seems like, a lot of governments around the world, not Canada, not just Canada or the United States or whatever, like, plenty of them around the world are trying to, I guess, still harness that control and kind of keep it in a sense. So, I fear that that's like kind of the route that, they're already lining out, right? Is like ESG is, a big topic of conversation, climate change, what have you, and Bitcoin mining is just terrible for it. So, how do you see that playing out? And yeah, let's dive into that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we're seeing early signs of the ESG narrative and climate change narrative, right? The foundations underpinning those are starting to wobble for sure. We're seeing whether it's more people speaking out or just more people saying, "Hey, even if I fully agree, yeah, the climate is changing. Like, I still need energy. I live in Canada, right? Like, if I have zero carbon, then that means I have no heating and no air conditioning, and I'm not going to last very long here. Um, so we need energy. Let's not forget that, and we need reliable energy. If the wind isn't blowing in the winter and the wind turbines are frozen, right? That happened in Texas a couple years ago, I think, right? That's a problem. Or the sun's not shining because in winter the sun is gone more, from basically 9 in the morning till 4 p.m. Or sorry, the sun's only around from 9 till 4, as opposed to now where it's here, the sun's out from like 7 a.m. till 9 p.m. We have a lot smaller window of sunshine, so we're going to get a lot less energy from the sun. Like, we need reliable energy to heat our homes, to cook our food, to do all the things we need to do to survive and thrive. So, we have to put climate change in context and understand, we can survive a changing climate. Again, if you're subscribing to the climate is changing, and that's an existential threat to humanity. So yeah, I'm not as worried about those narratives as I once was, because I see maybe a little more dissent and a little bit more pushback on it. At the same time, we're also seeing that much more support for Bitcoin from different avenues, whether it's the Troy Crosses of the world who talk about the benefits of Bitcoin in the energy landscape. I mean, there's and also whether it's political support, they couldn't even prosecute Ripple as a security. I think Bitcoin's going to be okay. I'm not worried about them coming down on it. We can get into CBDCs if you really want to afterwards, but yeah, I find more and more as Bitcoin grows, as it grows in value, it also grows in influence. It's growing. That means it's growing in the amount of people using it, the amount of people that are interested in it. And that includes whether it's politicians and regulators and bankers and all the people who may have been against it. It's sneaking up behind them and sort of tickling their interest a little bit. And that they become active players and advocates in a sense for Bitcoin when it becomes, when it creeps into their backyard, but like they can't ignore it, or they have to, they start paying attention to it because they see the benefits of it in one degree or another. And so it's taking power away from sort of the state, if we want to just general put everything in that state bucket, the ESG, climate change state bucket, whatever. It siphons power from the state as its own power and influence grows. So how it's going to impact that, I just see it, the incentives playing out over time, basically. Like Bitcoin's incentives are as, I don't want to use the word perfect, but as great as anything we've ever had. And barring, something that I can't even imagine at this point, the incentives will continue to play out, like barring Bitcoin shutting down, which, how are we going to do that? I have no idea. Bitcoin's just going to keep winning. It won't be a smooth ride necessarily, but it'll keep winning.
Oh yeah, and I definitely agree with all of that statement, right? I mean, there's definitely the criticisms and everything else, but you brought up CBDCs, so I say we should go there now, right? I mean, like FedNow is now live, I guess, which is not a retail CBDC here in the United States, but it definitely seems like it's trending that way. It seems like a lot of governments across the globe are implementing CBDCs. We've seen China start to do stuff like that, where you even need to, I think it's like scan your retinas in order to pay at this point. So a lot of wild things going around the world just to access your money. So it seems like that's kind of like the next roadblock, right? I mean, like governments are going to either hand out free CBDCs in a sense as like stimulus, right? To kind of able to spend. And then, because you're, spending CBDCs, that will, in a sense, like just use the ease of the, make it easy to use that sort of money. And so the average normie is going to do that. Or even, potentially implement laws where, like, point of sale terminals, they'll let you pay with anything, right? Dollars, gold, even, or Bitcoin or whatever it is. But now you need to scan your retinas in order to pay. So it seems like they're kind of like almost hinting at a lot of things that are almost, I guess, anti-Bitcoin in a sense, where there will be monitoring your spending more so now than ever. So, I guess, how do you see this whole CBDC shenanigans playing out? I mean, because to me, it seems like, in a sense, like that the Bitcoiners will try to resist and, do everything that they can, but, they're going to make it very difficult, for Bitcoiners to continue down this path.
Yeah, like central bankers, they can't help themselves, right? The CBDCs, if they're going to try to implement them, and obviously it seems like they are going to at least make an effort to do so. It's the antithesis of Bitcoin in terms of its value proposition, right? It's money that can be frozen, that can be, taken out of your account, that can be censored, they can prevent you from spending it. So, the value proposition is nil. It's more centrable, obviously, than money, than cash today, or gold, or Bitcoin, obviously. If anything, like, bring it up, bring it in. Like, if this is the inevitable outcome, like, Bitcoin has to face the final boss at the end of the day. There's sort of no avoiding it. So if Bitcoin's going to become what it was designed to become, it must overcome all foes, right? It must overcome all challengers. Central banks are the final boss, right? Augustus Carstens with his big suit and the little button holding together the entire financial system. If you know that meme, he's the head of the BIS. He's a rather large fellow. There's, at some point, maybe there's a showdown, or maybe by the time they actually get their shit together and figure out how they're going to actually try to implement it, because I think they still have a lot of headwinds and roadblocks ahead of them. They're just going to highlight the value proposition of Bitcoin that much more. So I actually don't spend a lot of time worrying about CBDCs. I think, it's sort of this paper threat that, they dangle over you, but I don't think they're really as close to implementing it as they would like you to believe. And even when they do try to implement it, the roadblocks, such as, if you're saying I can transact without any friction using your CBDC, well, then what need do I have for my bank, which makes $1 billion a year on transaction fees? They're just going to roll over and take it. There's some friction there. I don't know, how's the bank going to react when they say, yeah, that $1 billion you make every year in banking fees, we just, with our CBDC, now it's more efficient, so you don't need to charge people anymore. They're going to go, we like making that money. So there's just, like I said, these frictions that maybe are not so obvious that will need to be figured out one way or another. And so, yeah, I don't spend too much time worrying about it. Like, people are not going to be so eager to uptake it. And if they are, and if it's foisted upon them or forced upon them, it'll just highlight Bitcoin's value proposition that much more. Because, like you said, you have the point of sale terminal. It's a lot easier to implement a Bitcoin point of sale than a gold point of sale. And cash has its limitations. And plus, it's just paper. They can print more of it. So what's the value proposition anyway? So yeah, CBDCs don't scare me all that much, to be honest.
Yeah, I kind of like that point. I didn't really think about that, but I do agree. Like, at the end of the day, where the most incentives are, like, people are going to gravitate towards that, right? Whether it's, Bitcoin or something else that hasn't, been implemented just yet. But you did bring up cash and kind of like the US dollar. And we did have, RFK Jr., who seemingly was like the darling of Bitcoin Twitter for a while, but it seems like people are kind of maybe questioning him a little bit now, because he just announced that if he were to be elected, that he would back the US dollar by hard assets. And he listed, gold, real estate, and Bitcoin, coincidentally. So, obviously Bitcoiners kind of gravitated to backing the US dollar by Bitcoin, But yeah, well, what do you think about all this? I guess like the movement towards this, and do you think that this is like a viable solution, or do you think he's just kind of spewing it now to try to get some votes?
It's a good question, man. RFK is an interesting character. It's definitely possible to agree with him on some things, not others. I think I saw at one point he wanted to like ban assault rifles. It's like, what? So you're saying only bad guys can have assault rifles because they're criminals, and only police, which are or army, which when governments turn sour, those are the groups that turn against the people. That's the group you're saying should only have guns. Like, maybe that's questionable. But anyway, we'll leaving that part aside, because I haven't gone all the way down his whole platform or anything. His idea of backing dollars, with a basket of hard goods or whatever, is that practical? Is that politically, is there any political appetite for that? Because you still have to deal with this, the apparatus of the U.S. government. Could you actually get that done? It seems like there's going to be a lot of roadblocks to trying to back, if it's new debt issuance or whatever he said, or dollars with certain things or multiple goods. It's questionable. The one thing that was great was he said, we'll get rid of capital gains tax on Bitcoin. And to me, that effectively makes Bitcoin like money, because now if I go and I'm in Canada, I don't have Strike, but if I go with Strike and I say, okay, I'm going to spend Bitcoin, and the payment processor or the recipient is going to, they're just going to immediately convert it to dollars on their end. Now I'm just spending my Bitcoin. I'm not worried about tax implications. That's what we want, right? I just want to be able to send and receive Bitcoin without anyone in between, and anyone, saying, oh, I need a cut of that. So that's probably a really intelligent step, and that's something we should see everywhere. Legal tender, like they have in El Salvador. I don't know that needs to be the case everywhere. It won't necessarily be the case everywhere. Eventually, when currencies all fail, it's not going to matter anyway, because it's just, the dollar is enforcing the legal tender laws. And if there's no dollar, there's no legal tender laws. There's just transactional, individuals doing transactions. So legal tender isn't the biggest deal in my mind. But getting rid of capital gains would be great. I would love to see that, because then you make Bitcoin more palatable, both as for spending and saving.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think that's the biggest takeaway that I had as well, is like right now in the United States, like it's not very, like the incentives aren't there for businesses to accept Bitcoin as, payment. Exactly like you lined out, right? I mean, like you have to, pay capital gains tax along with sales tax and everything else, and it makes it very difficult for like a small business owner to accept that. So, I know you guys have Tahinis up in Canada who's put Bitcoin on their balance sheet, but they don't even accept Bitcoin as payment right now too, because it's just the incentives aren't there. It makes it very difficult for a small business. So I think at least in the United States, that's a big step. But I agree with you there on like backing the dollar on like with some sort of basket of goods of hard assets. Like I just don't really see if it's feasible at all. And then in a sense, like, all right, well, how much is like we're pricing Bitcoin right now in dollar terms. So to kind of like revert that, I don't know. It seems like it's something that could be manipulated to make the dollar, whatever it is. And I just don't really see like a plan lining it out.
That's the thing. The reason the gold the gold system failed was because they were printing more currency notes said to have gold in backing it than there was actually gold backing it. So if you're backing dollars with Bitcoin, well, you could kind of still print dollars, I guess, and say, hey, we have some Bitcoin, but you need to be able to, for the gold system to work, for the gold standard system to work, you would need to definitively connect, this ounce of gold to this dollar, right? Like we need to make physical connection, understand that it's there 1-to-1, and that there's no excess on one side or the other. Well, on the dollar side, obviously. But you can't guarantee that. The whole solution of Bitcoin is that you don't need to back a currency with Bitcoin. Just use Bitcoin as the currency because you know for a fact you have it or you don't, and there's only so much of it. So I don't need to back Bitcoin by anything. Bitcoin is the thing that does the backing, and it's designed specifically for transactions. So let's use it for that. Holding it in reserve so you can have this currency, it just perpetuates the power of the currency, which is not the goal, or shouldn't be
Yeah,
the goal.
it seems like too, it's like down the line, right? I mean, if you get a non-Bitcoiner in office, it'll turn out something like what happened in 1971, right? I mean, where
Yeah.
they just like depeg the dollar and then it starts the cycle all over again until we have something, similar to Bitcoin or even like just revert back to Bitcoin. I don't even know. I don't even know how that future would play out, but it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense at this point.
Yeah,
But
and it would be difficult to forge or fudge the fact that you have Bitcoin in storage, right? Like you could say, oh, I have 100 ounces of gold, but really I have 10 ounces of gold, and you have some auditor who comes in and they sign off on it, but wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you pay them under the table to say there's 100, but there's only 10. Bitcoin would be a lot more difficult to do that because hey, just show me the address on the ledger, sign a message from the key, prove that the US government has the key to these coins. Okay, we know that there's that many Bitcoin, so there can only be this many dollars. Now, can we control the dollar printing mechanism? That's a whole other story. So it could potentially be a sort of step up, but it's still not like a desirable system.
yeah, and I think, in a sense, like RFK, like, whether you agree with his policies or not, like I think he was trying to, it almost seems like, I'm very wary when politicians bring up Bitcoin because like one, it seems like, Bitcoiners are a very I guess maybe it's me in the echo chamber, but a very loud group of people on the internet, right? On Twitter,
Yeah.
right? Bitcoin Twitter is very popular. And they're very passionate. And it seems like a lot of Bitcoiners are kind of on, split on sides of things. Maybe a lot identify as more libertarian and don't really agree fully on both sides of things. But, when they bring up Bitcoin, it's trying to turn people into like one issue or single issue voters, which, I mean, I think like if you like Bitcoin for the freedom aspects of things, RFK might not necessarily be your guy, but he's the one that's being the loudest when it comes to Bitcoin related topics. So it is kind of an interesting little dichotomy here. And I think like, politicians are understanding now that, maybe this is the libertarian side of things. Maybe we could flip this population into one side or the other and, make it so, it'll help elect so and so into office. But I think it is kind of an interesting thing that we're going to start to see play out over the next, definitely this election cycle here in the United States, but in 2024. But I think in 2028 and beyond, that's just going to be even more elevated. So overall, even though you don't necessarily agree with the backing of Bitcoin or backing the US dollar with Bitcoin, do you see this as like maybe as like a positive or a negative? Do you think like the normies who hear RFK say this think like what the hell is this magic internet money, or or they actually kind of take a dive into Bitcoin and try to learn a little bit more from there?
No, I think it's a positive that he's bringing it up. It's become a talking point. It's become an issue to some degree on, the campaign trail. I know, DeSantis and maybe a couple others are also generally supportive of it. So it's becoming a more prominent issue, which is good. At the same time, politicians make promises and then they break them. Like that's par for the course. So he can say, "I'm going to get rid of capital gains." That's nice. If you get in, let's see you follow through. We'll see if that happens. Who knows? So yeah, you got to take everything with a grain of salt, but just understand, I guess, that Bitcoin is this force that it's beyond their control, regardless. One of the things I found really interesting, RFK, I think it was right after the Bitcoin conference in Miami, he sent out some kind of tweet and he goes, "I'm gonna, promise I'll give you permission. You can spend your Bitcoin anywhere you want." And I replied, I'm like, I don't need your permission. That's the whole value proposition. But thanks for your support anyway. Like you can outlaw it. That's not going to change the physical reality that I can spend my Bitcoin whenever I want. You can say I have your blessing, but if I don't have your blessing, I can still spend it. So, your blessing doesn't mean anything here. Figure it out. happy you're supportive, but like, we don't need your permission and we're not asking for it.
Yeah, and I think that's the still like kind of like the power struggle that we're going through, right? Is that like the politicians still think like, hey, we're gonna give you permission, and this is like kind of them almost being like, oh, we'll like wipe our hands a little bit of our power, but in a sense, like the undertones that they have, it still seems like they want that power, right? I mean, they worked their whole careers to get where they're at, and so that's essentially like something that they're not going to give up very easily. And so, yeah, I mean, in my opinion, I'm just always like very skeptical of politicians in a sense. One, just prior to Bitcoin, I was always questioning it, but two, now with the spread of information, we see old clips of not even just RFK, but all other politicians, right? Where they said something 20, 30 years ago, and
Yeah.
then now the exact opposite. So,
Yeah.
go
I mean,
ahead.
people can learn their lesson too, right? I know RFK had said something about, people who deny climate change should, have their head shook or whatever. But, I think he's since come and he said, oh, yeah, like I understand that they're actually using it as a tool for control. They're going to say, scream climate change, climate change, climate change. Therefore, don't drive your car, don't leave your house, don't fly. Basically, just stay home until the weather stays perfectly stable or something. Like, that's them exerting control, and we need to recognize that. And that's one of the lessons that Bitcoin teaches, is that we don't need, you can have leaders, but we have to be careful of concentrating power in the hands of leaders. If anything, we should have multiple leaders on any topic, in any industry, and they can compete, and but like at the end of the day, they shouldn't have excess power, because what happens, as we saw with COVID, if you give public health all the power and they say, this is the one solution we have, we're going to lock down everyone. Well, what if you're wrong? What if you're wrong that lockdowns aren't the right solution? You create more harm because you have more power if you're wrong. If you say instead, hey, public health, we're making a recommendation. Okay, well, I can listen to it or not listen to it. And if I don't listen to it, I just go about my day, and whatever happens. But if I'm wrong, I pay for it. But if I'm not wrong, I'm not harmed by it. But when you have the power to implement across a huge swath of people who have different opinions, experiences, knowledge, and who might say, yeah, I think differently about this topic or that topic, they might be right, and then they can help spread. People will see that they're right, and people will learn from them. But when you have concentrated power, it's this big hammer that hammers out everything. And so you can either have huge one-off impacts that go across the board, or a bunch of little tiny impacts, and people can sort of adapt and see, oh, this one's working there and that one's working there. Let's take the little bits from here, there that are working. And that's how you adapt more quickly, because you have multiple leaders and power is more dispersed, as opposed to all the power concentrated, where it's just boom, one outcome. It better be right or everyone pays the price. And so Bitcoin, makes decentralizing power more of a reality, more of a possibility.
Yeah, and I like absolutely love that explanation. And that kind of like brings me back to the thought of like the ESG narrative, right? I mean, we're kind of talking about that, here and there throughout this conversation. So, I kind of want to just, I guess I'll put you on the spot here, because it seems like not only here in like the United States is a big topic, but it seems like it's even more of a topic in Canada where you're at, right? I mean, I think I just saw like Toronto's like trying to pass something where you can't have two-stroke like lawnmowers. You need like
yeah, that was the thing that the city of Toronto was trying to push the other day.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it seems like it's going to be a growing concern for everything. So I'll leave you with this little nugget. Like we've basically had the technology to track weather, probably for less than even a century, for able to track like hurricanes, like massive amounts of whether it's like earthquakes in, the middle of the ocean that nobody really feels, like all these kind of things. And the spread of information now obviously is a lot quicker. So, it seems like the climate is under more of a microscope now more than ever. So my personal opinion, I think but basically because we've been able to track this weather for some time, we've been able to, now we're seeing like record highs, so to speak, but we've only been tracking it for a small period of time. So we don't really know, I guess, if these are full record highs or whatnot. So in your eyes, like, do you kind of, I guess, agree in a sense of mine, or do you kind of like think, I'm kind of off base here in a sense, in that, we should listen to the quote unquote experts when it comes to the ESG narrative.
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, expert became a derogatory term the last few years, that I don't like all that much. But that's, but like just sort of zooming out, if you think your actions can change the weather, that's nice, I guess. If you want to do that, like lead by example. Don't tell me I have to do something. If you want to convince me, like do it yourself. Show me the way, right? Like if we have the politicians who fly around to conferences. You know what? Stop flying around. You go, oh, but I bought a carbon offset. Yeah, with whose money? Like no, lead by example. Don't leave your house. Don't don't fly on private planes. Don't have an army of servants cooking for you and looking out for you. And just you do the things that you're preaching. Show me that you can live that life and that it's a better life and it's better for me. And if I see the benefits, then I might be inclined to follow. But if you're going to gaslight me and do all the things you say I shouldn't do, well, of course I'm not going to take you seriously. And there's obviously competing, science on all sides, experts on all sides. I'm not at all obviously an expert in climate. I just think it's silly that, I'm going to pay we have a carbon tax here. 0.48% of the population of the world lives in Canada, maybe, and we're paying a tax that's somehow going to change the weather for the entire planet. Like, how's Canadians, wake the fuck up. Anyway, yeah. So I don't care too much for that stuff. I want to see leaders lead and not just talk, like walk the walk, don't talk the talk. Let me see the benefits. And if I can observe them by verifying, seeing that they're real, then maybe I'll follow. Like, don't get me wrong. I want to reduce waste. I don't want to see pollution. I think reducing waste is a good idea. But there are better ways to reduce waste than these, like, oh, we got rid of single-use straws. Now we get paper straws that come wrapped in plastic. It's like, okay, I think we've missed the point here. So the whole the climate ESG thing, it's over the target. It's too far. It's gone too far. It's crazy. It makes no sense. Economically, it doesn't make sense. Scientifically, I think it probably doesn't make sense. That's not to say the climate's not changing, but like the climate's always changing. Humans need to adapt to it. I think I read at one point, like a volcano explosion puts out more carbon than, the entire planet does in the span of a month or of several months or something. So, what impact are we really having? It's probably pretty difficult to measure. There's also benefits to CO2. We can't have no CO2. Anyway, sorry, this isn't a carbon podcast, so we don't need to go on about that, but I think you get the idea.
No, yeah, 100%. I just think, like, the narrative is, always being, like, I guess, changed. The bars continually being moved, right? I mean, it's something that, like we kind of said before, right? It's almost like something for control. And I think that, it'll be like very interesting to see how this like plays out over the next couple years, because I think that's going to be a growing, maybe like spearhead or a growing argument from one side of the coin. I mean, I even saw a tweet today from Doomberg. So shout out to Doomberg. If you guys don't follow him, I've had him on the Macro Pod. He's outstanding. But he posted a screenshot of a CNN article where the title is "Underground Climate Change is Deforming the Ground Beneath Buildings," Study Finds. So, I mean, like, how does that even make any sense? Underground climate change. I don't know. But I mean, hey, like, it's like I actually had like I saw like Trudeau have like a speech today where he was like talking about democracy and like respect and like this is for democracy. And I feel like when politicians get in front of screens or whatever, or cameras or whatnot, that they just have like a list of buzzwords, and that's kind of their MO is just like hit these buzzwords. Like nobody really understands what they mean or in the context of what they're saying, but they're saying democracy, and that makes me prideful in a sense,
So in that video, I think I know the one you're talking about. He's literally kicking out people. He's in this like gymnasium maybe or something. So he's got a couple hundred, people in an audience around him. and people just stand up and start trying to question him and challenge him. And obviously they have to raise their voices because he has a microphone and they don't. So they're trying to speak loudly and challenge and question. And he entertains them for a minute or two. And then he's like, you know what, police, we need to get this person out of here. And then another person does it. And he ends up kicking out like 5 people in this video in sequence. It's just like, oh my, he doesn't hear criticism. Trudeau's got a whole laundry list of problems. That guy's crazy, doing a lot of harm to this country too. It's like, you say the word democracy. Well, democracy is listening to people you disagree with. And if you're just going to, anytime someone disagrees with you, this agenda, that agenda, he's got a whole bunch of them that are, there's opposition to them. If you can't listen to them and you can't reason and your whole modus operandi is just, I'm implementing this no matter what, now you're not being, democratic. Now this is where authoritarianism comes from. This is tyrannical, the nature of tyrants. We don't want that here. We had, you got the one pushback from the truckers, like, learn your lesson. If you keep ramming stuff down our throat, there's going to be pushback coming in other areas. Like it's bound to happen if he keeps doing this. Anyway, sorry. Now we're getting political. We're carbon. I thought this was a Bitcoin podcast.
Yeah, no, my bad. But I mean, I feel like it's all kind of like intertwined, especially with, what is going on right now, right? I mean, we brought up RFK, like bringing up Bitcoin, and that's just kind of, I think like, you mentioned the drawbacks in your book, which, obviously I've gone over this a couple of times, but it's absolutely outstanding. So everybody should go check it out. But I think like the next drawback that I see, especially with like 2024 coming up, is the political aspects of things, which, they can't turn Bitcoin off, right? We highlighted the decentralization aspect of it. And I mean, I think that's like, probably the most powerful thing when it comes to Bitcoin. And I think like, it's corny, but I think few people really do understand, that aspect of it and how powerful taking the power away from the people, really is. And I think, that just to kind of bring it all back to Bitcoin, that's what I, I'm kind of getting at here is that, like politicians, whether you're never going to agree with somebody in general, 100% on everything, right? You're going to have some sort of disagreement. And, even with your parents, your best friends, your, sisters, brothers, whatever. But, in a sense, you should be able to work together. Well, we've gotten to this place where, they want us to be more divided. They want us to be, kind of working against each other because like once you're divided and you're not united, you're easier to control. And that's what I think, Bitcoin really kind of takes away from the people there.
I'm gonna try to find this real quickly. This is maybe a good way to round out this talking point. But I call Bitcoin. Okay, so you're talking about people being divided, right? Yeah. And by politics. So Bitcoin was purpose built. I'm reading from the book now. Bitcoin was from the same chapter, from the What is Money, the introduction actually. It was purpose-built to restore the uplifting capacity of money and challenge the proficiency of the legacy monetary system. It incentivizes collaboration. This is why I want to bring this up. It incentivizes collaboration by acting as an impartial, right? So it's not left, it's not right, it's neutral. By acting as an impartial and mutually beneficial medium that, if increasingly chosen as the preferred basis for commerce, has the potential to generate remarkably positive economic and social outcomes. So I've sort of referred to Bitcoin. I say it without saying it there, but it's this common ground, right? Bitcoin is a common ground. We can all agree on it, right? You can run a node. I can run a node. We all agree there's 21 million. We know where all the 21 million coins are. We don't have to see eye to eye on absolutely everything, but if we agree, okay, Bitcoin's worthwhile, I'm going to accept it. You're going to accept it. I'm going to send it. You're going to send it. We start to generate this common ground that, okay, we have a leg to stand on when dealing with one another. And that's what's been missing from the world the last few years and a lot longer, but it's been exacerbated the last few years.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think that's a great place to kind of like bring it all together and like wrap it up in a sense. So Jesse, I really appreciate you coming on and taking this hour to chat with me about a whirlwind of topics. But I think it is intertwined, and I think in the end, you should definitely recommend for the audience listening. I recommend his book, He definitely puts in, you've heard 2 paragraphs here that are very well written and thought out. Every single word in there, really helps like dive into, what is money, what is Bitcoin, the positives, negatives, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I like that. He's showing the what is money on the back of the cover for those listening on just audio. But Jesse, I'll leave it here. Why don't you tell people what else you got going on and where they can find you and your book?
Yeah, cheers, brother. You can find me on Twitter at Jayberjay, Jayberjay. You can find me on Noster. I'm not going to read my NPub out, but it's a little more complicated than at Jayberjay. The website, magicbitcoinbook.com. Buy it on Amazon, paperback, right? Buy the Kindle, the ebook, audiobook read by Guy Swan. And thanks to Mash, which is actually a local Bitcoin Lightning company, local for me anyway, in Toronto. My book is now, it's the first book powered by Lightning. You can buy individual pages of my book if you want to just check it out for a few hundred sats per page. Start reading it if you like it. You can buy the whole book. The whole thing's a work of art, so grab it. And if you don't, that's cool too. You can get a little teaser by checking out the website.
Yeah, it's great stuff, and I couldn't recommend it more. So, and Jesse's a great guy. I mean, if you didn't get that from this conversation, he's awesome, dude. It was great to meet you in person, share a beer, and even though you got pulled away, but we'll have to do it again sometime soon. And yeah, Jesse, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Yeah, man, this was great.